Sky is dripping gold and wrapping around me. Life can be so wonderful, warm and gentle light. Nothing's gonna bring me down, I'm feeling so divine. Life can be so wonderful, warm and gentle light. Nothing's gonna bring me down, I'm feeling so divine.
Feeling divine, I'm feeling the vibes. I feel like it's more than just a feeling, what we could define. Let's break through the ceiling, see what limits that we could defy. Cause I could do anything I want, it's for me to decide. Bring you up to speed, take the wheel, let you drive. It's alright on a dark road, let the fire in us be the light. Day and night, yeah, we only seem to free our mind at night. That's just life, that's just how we pay the price.
I woke up today feeling like royalty. The sky is dripping gold and wrapping around me. Life can be so wonderful, warm and gentle light.
right now. I feel like a king right now. I zone out when it get too loud, but I'm still locked in, getting lost and found. That would never bring me down. I feel like a king right now.
Go on and take my eyes, you're all I can see. I love to let you have your way with me. Go on and take my eyes, go on and take my eyes. I love to let you have your way with me. Life can be so wonderful, open, gentle light. Nothing's gonna bring me down. I'm feeling so divine.
Crypto's dead. The music. Rip home mining. So, yeah. What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Duck once again, and welcome to the Crypto Mining Show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. I go by Matthew in real life and Blind Rod on the internet, and I've been digging into the Qubic subject, so I thought I'd catch you all up to date. So there was a report from Cointelegraph that said that Qubic was successful in calculating gaining 51% of the hash rate on Monero. That is proven false, at least from the analysis done by the Shy over there at previously known for Kaspa. He wrote up an article here, but I have some disagreements with this article. So I appreciate the work on the hash rate. The community notes were made on X in particular, which I think is fantastic. And we were able to essentially correct that falsification used for promotion for Qubic. I think the thought that was going around was that they were successful. As I mentioned in yesterday's video that I think was posted this morning, it wasn't successful. They are continuing to attempt to do so, as verified by CFB or Come From Beyond on X, which we'll cover here too, because I had a little bit of a conversation with him via X, as well as a blog writer, promotional guy for Qubic in my DMs, which I won't share the DMs, but there's a couple things there that I'll talk about that I have problems with. Just the way the people in the crypto space like to obfuscate and make others feel dumb so that they can tell you that they're right. Whenever somebody's doing that, just heads up, immediately they're trying to scam you. If there's an appeal to intelligence, but they still confirm the basic operation of what they're doing, just know that that is more than likely somebody that has ill intent toward you, and be very careful. Don't just go out and purchase the cryptocurrency because you don't understand it. In fact, if you don't understand why something's good or important, and it can't be boiled down in easy to understand terms, then it's not real. Okay. Let's talk about this though. So like I said, this is on Shy's blog, and I definitely, or his Git book, and it should be linked down below. Suffice to say, the beginning of this report covers effectively the assumed amount of hash rate based off of selfish mining and attempting to orphan blocks by holding back blocks and submitting them at a particular time. That's effectively what it was. So the hash rate will look higher than it actually is. In this particular case, the assumption is the actual hash rate was around 28%, while perceived hash rate was around 35%. Okay. And that's just based off of solved blocks and how it's getting reported. And depending on, what reporting software you're using or whatever Grafana tools you're utilizing to determine this type of stuff, that's what you may see. So the verdict's the important part. He does say that given the data and analysis, I can say with confidence that Qubic managed to obtain at least 28% of the current Monero hash rate. This is congruent with 35% perceived hash rate, as well as the known bounds for sire, I suppose, of the hash rate used by Qubic for selfish mining. At least 5% came from new sources of hash and not migrating Monero miners. It is implausible that Qubic managed to obtain a majority of the actual hash rate, as applying the sire with a majority miner reduces to an indefinitely long double spending attack. The probability of creating a 6-block deep reorg with a 20% or with 28% of the hash rate is about 0.3%, which is congruent with the fact that only one such occurrence was observed. However, this should be taken very lightly, as the standard deviation of this process is about the same magnitude as the sample window we have, which is only a couple weeks at this time, which was at epoch 174. Please go back and watch that video if you have not, so that you're aware. And I think that aside, so it was, I'm glad he did this write-up. I'm glad that we had some community notes to correct the report from Cointelegraph advertising a 51% attack on Monero, because frankly, Monero is effectively the most decentralized, most based on principles of blockchain from the very beginning cryptocurrency that we currently have, with right to privacy is being taken into account, and obfuscated transactions, all that sort of stuff. Very good. And then obviously ASIC resistant. You could argue it's not fully ASIC resistant, but that's due to the RISC-V application specific integrated circuits from Bitmain called the X5s. There's not a ton of them out there, but there is. But there is an ASIC in general. It's not a true ASIC, though, to be clear. Now, so the argument goes to this. So the argument goes, effectively yesterday had this argument with somebody in chat, and I'm glad. I want to talk through these things with you guys and we can come to an understanding. I can always be wrong, but the statement was that this isn't a problem with ASICs. ASICs provide better security than CPUs and GPUs, and I said, well, that doesn't make sense because this is all incentivized. So to give you just a quick breakdown of what Qubic is doing, they're offering 3x the rewards to mine Monero through their network, as opposed to mining Monero directly. So the incentive is financially to move over and mine through Qubic so that you make more money. Pretty simple. So my argument was, ASICs don't matter. It's hardware agnostic, because if you set the same incentive up on any ASIC coin, the ASICs will swap over. Now, in this particular case, and Shai's analysis, which I think is a fair point, is he is saying only 5% was the, the switch over. He says that it's highly likely that, wait, where was it? So only 5% of the miners are new, if I understand that correctly. So, but I thought he had said, where is that point? So he says, of the hash rate used by Qubic for selfish mining, at least 5% came from new sources of hash and not migrating Monero miners. Well, that means 95% of the hash rate came from migrating Monero miners. So the way he worded it feels a little intellectually dishonest, in my humble opinion. Like, obviously 5% is not that much of new hash rate. Most of it is migrating Monero miners. And so I felt like it wasn't, and he uses this to go into a conclusion. But back to my point, a little bit of tangent. I just wanted to clarify that there, because it relates specifically to what I'm saying, which is if you align the incentive structure on an ASIC cryptocurrency, it doesn't matter. People will switch over for the financial incentive. Okay. And that goes into his conclusion, which I think is really interesting. So, and it's really here, that I think I disagree. So he says, what is the point of failure? To me, it's obvious, and I have been warning about this for years, so I find the vindication provided by Qubic pleasant. Well, I'm sorry, we're going to disappoint you a little bit. But he goes on to say that the answer is, of course, ASIC resistance. So he's saying he's blaming ASIC resistance for the possibility of this particular situation. He says, I have advocated for ASIC friendliness in the trenches, originally to justify Kaspa's choice of mining algorithm, but eventually as a cause of its own. Yes, the ASIC friendliness has its problems and creative solutions, rapid emissions, and insane block rates, alluding to, Kaspa's fast emissions and saying that solves a lot of them. I disagree. I think it amplifies them. And he says those are required to ensure good coin spread. Once again, not necessarily sure that's true, but anything other than ASIC friendliness is security vulnerability. That was the weak point that allowed a relatively small movement to bring a giant like Monero down to its knees. The problem is, at this point, that we have a new announcement coming from Come From Beyond at Qubic, and he ran a vote for the next coin to attack, including Kaspa itself. But the voting options were Dogecoin, Kaspa, and Zcash, all ASIC-friendly coins, and he is specifically targeting ASIC coins for the next round, I guess. We'll see. He says it's going to take a couple months at this point to prepare, but I guess maybe I should feel vindicated now, too. I don't know. Shy, I'll tweet at me. I'd love to have this conversation with you. In fact, by the way, I'd like to have Shy on specifically to talk about this because I think we fundamentally disagree, and it's a very interesting topic. Now, this hasn't happened yet, so I could still be wrong that it's hardware agnostic, but just the proposal and the fact that the proposal for Monero was poo-pooed previously, I assume that this is still going to go down the line of being implemented at some point, unless we can shut down the funding for Qubic. A primary factor for being able to shut down the funding for Qubic is going to be stop mining Monero through Qubic. That's the only way to stop this, I think, at this point. And that would be a removal of greed from people. And I don't think you can remove that greed in particular. So is this type of attack in particular, thwarted by security from ASICs? I'm going to still say no. I have no evidence of that. In fact, I have supporting evidence to the contrary. And I think that if we talk about Kaspa in particular, Kaspa is even at a bigger risk for this particular attack right now. Luckily, they chose Doge, but Kaspa has lost over 50% of its hash rate, its peak all-time hash rate, meaning that there is over 50% of the hash rate turned off right now for Kaspa. If there was an option for you to turn on your Kaspa miners and earn 3x the amount you could be earning on Kaspa and actually be profitable with your miners, of course you're going to turn on. Of course you're going to turn on. And that'll be new hash rate. And that would wreck Kaspa. And the crazy part is if you look at this objectively and you just look at the numbers and the amount of available hardware that's not currently turned on, and you look at the incentive structures being set up by Qubic, Kaspa is at the highest risk right now out of any of the cryptocurrencies. At least Doge is going to be an interesting one because Doge, due to its merge mining, which means basically that the script ASIC miners are, able to switch and change what they're mining and mine multiple things at one time. Because of that, Doge will be a much more difficult target to attack in this particular manner. Now, the Monero attack wasn't even necessarily successful either. So to say Monero was brought to its knees, that's disingenuous too, because that didn't happen. In fact, that to the contrary, in this particular case, there was selfish mining going on, but it's not like the network completely halted. So I feel like it's dangerous to write with a conclusion in mind, because then you end up in this kind of pickle. So that would be my argument. Okay. Anyways, so that's what's going on right now. Unfortunately, it does look like Qubic team is not going to be changing their direction. The argument when I asked, and I'll just show you guys because I'm trying to figure out why, right? So I did say, can I ask what is the advantage other than price manipulation of Qubic token via the buyback burn? I mean, kudos on the massive PR campaign, but I'm curious. To which Come From Beyond replied and said a lot of electricity is burned for useless proof of work. We need that electricity for AI. These words may be hard to get and I cannot reveal more now. In the future, they will eventually click. The problem is, and what I said here in response was like, that makes no sense. You don't have to attempt 51% attacks to have useful proof of work. I did say marketing jargon. I did take a poke. I get a little frustrated on Twitter. Anybody that follows me knows that I do. It is what I do. It is what it is. I'm trying to get better. I try mainly just to stay off of it, but when I'm researching stuff like this, I need to pop on and see. Now, I don't have verified. I don't have a verified confirmation that I was speaking to the real person, but somebody did reach out via DMs and alleged that they were a marketing coordinator. They accused the previous content of not having all the information, to which I replied, so at a very basic level, is this true? Mining Monero, or you're mining Monero through Qubic, or the Qubic platform passes the work through from the Monero blockchain to a miner. The miner solves that block, passes that back through Qubic, and then Qubic takes the rewards, sends it to the dev team, burns 50% or buys Qubic with the rewards of Monero, burns 50%, and then takes 50% and incentivizes miners. To which he said, well, that did change, to be fair. Now 100% of the rewards purchased, so they're taking 100% of the XMR, buying Qubic, and giving all that back to the miners right now, hence why they're able to do 3x the profitability. So that changed. So there's no more burning mechanism, which, to be fair, is better, right? But I do have a basic understanding. What he was able to say after that, though, is he went down the path of appealing to intelligence, saying Qubic is very complicated and you just wouldn't understand. And I said, well, explain it to me, kind of thing. But eventually I just said, look, I don't deal with appeal to intelligence without giving me any facts or things that you think need to be corrected. Because it's just, you either come to me with the evidence that I have something wrong, but what I've found in the crypto space is when you find a problem and you address it, especially as a content creator like myself, people come in and they try to make you feel stupid so that you can be unsure about yourself, so that you won't move forward with calling something out that's a negative activity. And this is a negative activity. Now, some other interesting things in particular, a lot of people, I noticed when I went into Red Panda Mining's channel earlier, I was talking specifically about the terms of service for DigitalOcean and, you know, what those are and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, and the fact that the pools for Qubic are going, you know, are being done on DigitalOcean, which as a previous pool op that did leverage DigitalOcean until it was against the terms of service, I know that that's against the terms of service. But when he went to mining pool stats, and I think we need to talk about this, he looked at the top, right? But you need to understand that this hash rate that's being shown is hash rate on the Qubic network, not hash rate going through the pool to XMR necessarily. So there are subdomains here. And if you go and you'll find the subdomain for like Qubic.ly is XMR. The most popular video on YouTube right now for how to mine Qubic is coming from Rabid Mining. And I might have to pull this up. I think he has one with 40,000 views, 46,000 views. In particular, in this video, he's utilizing that example with Qubic.ly. My assumption is right now, because the XMR subdomain is currently here, everybody that's mining through Qubic.ly right now is going through XMR, and hence why you don't see it at the top of the charts. Okay. Now, I'm sure that there's a certain portion that's going through the other ones. Why is this important? Well, I wanted to talk about, I think, like misunderstanding in general of like the communications between miners and the blockchains, and what I think, the Monero community in particular is doing right now is trying to DDoS like Qubic.org. And what I have found, I don't condone DDoSing, right? But there's a fundamental error in that what you would target in the case of mining to stop the mining is you need to stop the communication of the miner with the Qubic network. So you will want to target the open ports that interpret that data, typically known as a stratum on the mining pool. That would be the port. In this particular case, maybe like a 3333 or a 5555, depending, and so on, right? And in Qubic's case too, they have a different system as well, to where they don't. I think a lot of the way the data translates through is not necessarily that, but if you can stop the connection of the miner to the pool, then you stop the work being done. And in this particular case, what you're wanting to do is stop that pass through. But you also want to remain open. You also want to remain censorship free. So from Monero's perspective, it's not like they can, at the network level, block all of the IPs coming from Qubic, because then you bring into question Monero's, you bring into question the principles of Monero, which we've talked about with Warhog before, right? So the reason I talk about this, though, is during my research, what I did find, which is really, really interesting, is, and I'll give you guys some of these things, because this is all, a lot of people, I think that like hacking is extremely complicated, but a lot of the information you can just gather through public tools, right? And the reason this is important is because, in particular, you can find really simple things like if they're breaking terms of service, but you can use like MX Toolbox to run DNS records and figure out where it's being hosted. In this particular case, Qubic.ly is being hosted in DigitalOcean, and they don't allow cryptocurrency projects. So there is an option that is above board and legal to bring up with DigitalOcean in this particular case. I think it's still up in the air as to what I guess it's hard for me, because it seems like the actual intent is negative, right? And if you're considering it an attack, then it also is. So for example, DigitalOcean, right? You can't log into DigitalOcean, rent a bunch of VPSs via their terms of service. You can't do this and then DDoS someone. So you're denying a service, right? Or denying a service through a DDoS attack. You're not allowed to utilize their systems for any sort of attacks. And what I don't know is if they would consider what Qubic is doing and what the pools are enabling to be an attack on Monero. I think it is. And so that's a question I did send over to DigitalOcean kind of out of curiosity. But you have to cut off, I think it's kind of odd that they're going after the Qubic.org and not going after the mining pools, because obviously the biggest problem with crypto in general is the centralization via mining pools, and that's where you can really stop a lot of the services. Once again, I don't want to condone anybody doing anything illegal, but I think it's an interesting topic when you're talking about it as a whole, and then understanding how all of the pieces are put together, right? So in the case of Qubic, my understanding, at least at a very basic level, and I understand there's more advanced stuff going on, and maybe there'll be something that comes to light that I go, oh, and it'll click, and I'll be like, well, I had this wrong, and that wrong, but nobody will tell me right now. They just want to tell me that I don't fully understand, and maybe that's the case. But my understanding as of right now is the miner will talk to one of the pools. It will specifically go to a subdomain that is enabled for XMR mining through Qubic. And then it will communicate with the Qubic network. The Qubic network will then pass jobs from Monero to the actual, from Monero to the pool, and then from the pool to the miner. The miner will do the work, pass that back through to the pool, to the network. They'll provide the solved block to Monero and then take the reward, right? That's basically about it. Now, let's go through some chat, because I think a lot of people have a lot of questions here in general. And Gerald says, I'm wondering why they don't take it over and take the blocks. And that's because they didn't have enough hash rate, right? So they went into selfish mining And the distinction you need to understand about selfish mining is with enough hash rate, you can hold you can hold back the blocks, and then you can put those blocks in effectively in a timing that will orphan another valid block. And so you will effectively cancel out another valid block in the transaction. So you get some transactional control over the network, but not full. So that's why they didn't have enough hash rates, the basic answer to that. Let's see. So I'm trying to see what the valid questions are as far as talking crap. I get it. A lot of frustration surrounding this, a lot of emotion surrounding it, but I don't think that it's necessarily what I want to turn the show into. Attacking Kaspa through Qubic completely leaves out who is the biggest money benefactor of Kaspa and who really controls the heavy hash mining equipment. Bitmain and Ice River are not swapping over. I don't know if that's necessarily true. You would have to say that my understanding is, well, Ice River is probably a big player, but you have to look. It's a statistical fact that half of the machines are off. Okay. That was my point. So the 50% that are still on, yes, probably owned by large mining farms that have a vested interest in Kaspa itself. The other 50% don't. They're turned off because it was not financially viable for them to continue to mine. If they can get value out of the miners that are turned off and they turn back on to do this, then that has nothing to do with, they have no tie specifically to Kaspa at that point other than maybe current holdings. So I think you're incorrect there as far as current hash rate. Yes, powered off hash rate, which we know the total is at half of what its peak was, meaning that over or at least half of the hash rate would come back on if incentivized properly, and financial incentives are very strong. So I don't think that you're correct as far as that goes. I don't think that Marathon Digital won't switch over either, right? Or even if they don't, I still think there's enough ASICs powered off that would get powered on if they could get some revenue out of it, right? I think there would be discussions in large companies as to what the amount of holdings there are, but you take Marathon Digital, for example, they've been selling a majority of Kaspa to keep their Bitcoin mining up and running, right? So we know that Marathon Digital is not focused on holding their Kaspa. If Marathon Digital, which is one of the largest Kaspa miners, were holding their Kaspa, they may be financially incentivized beyond turning their miners back on, but that's just not the case. The fact is we've already shown that Marathon Digital sells it. So they're not vested in holding Kaspa, right? So that would be my analysis in response to that airdrop. But how did fund the Qubic in the first place? Well, he is the IOTA founder. There are a lot of other, I'm sure there's a ton, like these guys that are running it, they've clearly been in crypto for an extremely long amount of time. They could be sitting on a ton of reserves, right? We aren't going to know exactly where the funding is, but a lot of it is getting covered through the mining of Monero, right? And that is why you are able to effectively determine that. Wait, where are we go? Yeah, so you're able to effectively determine that they are using this via the change in their incentive structure for mining Monero. Taking the 50%, right, that they had, or taking the 50% that they were using to burn, and then now using that to incentivize the miners. They've clearly increased the amount that they're trying to incentivize the miners. So that would tell me that that is at least being utilized to cover the funding to a certain extent, right? Now, John does say that, and I guess I need to find the latest Marathon Digital reports, because I could be incorrect here. This, the last I checked, I guess, was at the beginning of the year. Marathon Digital. Oh, Kaspa Holdings. Maybe that'll pull up the report for me. So let's go The last one I see was in June of 2024. I've already read that one. John, if you could give me that information and link it to me on Twitter, that'd be fantastic. I'm glad to correct it if that's the case. I can't do a quick Google search apparently as of right now and find it, but let me see if there's another press release here that I'm missing. Press releases. Second quarter results. Here we go. Okay. Well, no, this is, I need the earnings presentation or that 10, it's the 10Q, right? That's what we want. Yeah. All right. So here's the 10Q. I did find it. We're going to do a control F on Kaspa and we will see that, let's see. So this is their digital assets as of right now, as of the previous quarter. Okay, so this was okay, so this was December of 2024, which was 34 million. But we go to June of, maybe I'm reading this wrong. Okay. Significant asset holdings as of June 30th. I'm showing 0 Kaspa holdings as of June 30th. You're saying it's in other digital assets is Kaspa. Okay, so if we assume that, we went to 5,836. From 5,624. Based off of the amount of Kaspa they would be mining, I would assume this would be a lot higher. I don't think that I'm happy to say to correct, but I'm not reading this as a correction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think an increase of value of $212 from December 31st to June 30th in other digital assets represents a holding of Kaspa that they're mining. Is that fair? Do you agree or am I reading this wrong? Let me zoom in for you. I want to make sure we all agree on this, right? Here's the number. This is what they currently have in other digital assets, which implies more than just Kaspa. $5,836 for the cost basis with a fair value of $2,259. So this is what they spent, right? This is was their cost basis and this is what it was worth. So their fair value of other digital assets has cut in half. No worries, no worries. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So then my original thesis would still hold, right? We're still holding water with the original thesis. I mean, I still think the original thesis, even if Marathon Digital was holding all of their Kaspa, even if they were, the actual thesis that matters doesn't rely on that, right? It relies on the fact that over half of the hash rate's turned off right now, right? So, even if I was incorrect on that as supplementary evidence, it doesn't invalidate the thesis that if incentivized properly, there's over half of the Kaspa hash rate that would be able to get turned back on right now, right? And then Stan says that the report, and let me link this for you guys too, because we did just pull this up. So I want to make sure you guys have access to all of this information. Let me link this for you guys in chat. So you can go over it. I know we've gone over these before. I haven't gone over one in a while. If we want to do a deep dive on this later, let me know and we'll do it. I don't want to do a deep dive right this second because I was planning on primarily covering this, where the direction was headed as it pertains to, Qubic and what their goals are. I did want to talk at least a little bit about like the technical workings between how that, transfer of work is happening between XMR and Qubic miners. My understanding is they're still getting paid out in Qubic. It's 100% Qubic that's bought with XMR. And I think that was evidenced when we looked yesterday by coin market cap. If we take a look at the XMR price recently decreasing, it just had a pump up though, because I think it showed resilience, right? And people are like, oh, it showed resilience, we're going to buy it back up. And then Qubic during that time, which was through August 7th, right, had gone up significantly, right? And now it's kind of going back down. So it's rebalancing out, which is interesting. And maybe that's due to all the press surrounding this particular topic as well. So you can't say that. I mean, it is a little bit of market manipulation games of, well, you're going to mine, we're going to buy Qubic, and then we're going to pay miners out with the Qubic. At the end of the day, the miners are still probably going to sell the Qubic. And so it's really like, I think funding is a valid question. We just don't have answers to it, right? So when does the funding for this run out, right? So IDOC, here's the problem. So IDOC asks a very important question, which is, does Qubic actually have enough GPU power to 51% Kaspa? Well, right now, their target is Dogecoin, which is much more difficult to do than Kaspa, okay? But that's not the path that they take, okay? My understanding is that the path they will take, and it's good to see you here, IDOC, but the path that they're going to take in particular is that they are going to enable ASICs to turn it into useful proof of work. That is their goal, and they want to prove that they can do it through this marketing tactic. So what I understand, because this was a breakdown in my understanding of what they were doing too, right? I think they want to demonstrate that they can change the purpose of the ASICs as well. So they're going to incentivize the already available hardware to point through a Qubic pool to Dogecoin, right? They're not going to point the GPUs, at least I don't think that they're going to point the GPUs to the script algorithm. I think they're going to incentivize script ASIC miners to point through Qubic, Dogecoin enabled Qubic pools. That would be the way I think they were going to do it. And yes, they are full of sketchy marketing tactics. It's clearly working because everyone's talking about it. Twitter is blowing the fuck up over it. So, like I said in the tweet to Come From Beyond, props on the massive PR campaign because everybody's talking about Qubic now. And it would be unfair to not acknowledge that that's the particular case, right? But I think that's what's happening. I don't think that it's GPU power. I think it's the other way around, right? I think it's incentivize the ASICs to push through. And then I think what they'll see and what's going to click is they're going to say, hey, look, I think what they want to do. And if it was me, this is how it makes sense. Because they're saying there's stuff we don't understand that they're doing on the back end of Qubic. What I think they're trying to do and what they want to do is they want to target ASICs in particular, incentivize ASIC miners to mine Dogecoin through a Qubic pool, and then somehow show some sort of evidence that they can utilize ASICs for some other useful task. I think that's what they want to do. I think, right? I could be completely wrong. I can't get any acknowledgement or confirmation of it, but throw on my tinfoil hat and my theory and my understanding of the current status of all this, and that is what I would assume is going to happen. Now, historically, I've been able to read these things fairly accurately, so I think I think that there's a high probability that that's the case. Is this going to be the chain's only use? No, I think what they want to do is they are trying to generate enough buzz to get enough funding to continue because here's the thing, 50% of the time, right, it's being utilized for their in-house AI. Garth is what the name of their AI. And the fact of the matter is LLMs are not profitable. Outside of, it's profitable for the hardware owners, but in practice, I think what we found is like outside of buzz, which is this is ironic to me to a certain extent because they're saying useful work is AI. AI is by and large, the actual model training of AI is by and large not very profitable. Once it's deployed, you can use it for profitable stuff, but at that point you're not processing, right? So I think there needs to be they're not going to be able to generate enough revenue off of AI Garth. And I think this is trying to get funding in a different manner, right? I think that's the goal. And I don't think I really honestly just don't think that like training LLMs is a profitable venture necessarily, right? At least in the long term. In the short term, yes. But long term, it's not necessarily, it's not like crypto mining, right? Where you're incentivized to stay on. Like there's no incentive to stay on past training. So are they going after Doge or all the merge coin? Well, they're going after Doge. The question will be, and I think this is a really interesting point, right? Doge has become, or Script has become more profitable. Script has become more profitable because of the merge mining enabled for the algorithm. Meaning you can mine multiple coins with one miner. And I think it's really interesting that they chose Doge. And I kind of agree with that choice because it is like, well, will it work? Because you will have to either enable merge mining, right, to increase the incentive, or you will have to be so much more profitable on just Doge alone that you incentivize people to move over, right? That's the only two ways that plays out. I do think their end goal is some sort of AI. I don't know exactly what they're thinking. I mean, what would be mind-blowing and make a lot of money once again is just like if they were able to somehow repurpose ASIC machines to do work outside of just hashing algorithms, right? Anyways, I had a couple other things that I thought I'd talk about today. I think it's a really interesting topic. I'll be covering it more on the channel, so make sure you're subscribed. But let's hop over to a little bit of tinfoil hat and some freaky stuff happening at the US Treasury, which is weighing a digital ID verification with DeFi to tackle illicit finance. You guys know I hate this kind of stuff, and I cover it to bring everybody's awareness to it, so start writing your congressman. But the U.S. Department of Treasury is seeking public feedback on how digital identity tools and other emerging technologies could be used to fight illicit finance in crypto markets, with one option being embedding identity checks into DeFi smart contracts. The consultation, published this week, stems from the newly enacted Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for Stablecoin Act, the Genius Act, which is basically the Patriot Act for cryptocurrency at the end of the day. This has been a disaster for cryptocurrency, in my humble opinion. This has been the worst thing that's happened since Trump has become president. And it is basically just a massive invasion of privacy and a complete dismantling of the principles of cryptocurrency. That's my opinion. And, I feel a little tricked and a little lied to over this whole thing. Maybe some of y'all share that frustration with me, but I've not been happy with this administration's direction when it comes to this stuff, because part of it sounds good, right? We've lightened the regulation, which I think needs to happen. So that part's good. But then you get into it and it's like, well, we're going to leverage this, this, and this, and we're turning into basically a surveillance state. And we are starting to realize that we're getting a lot of surveillance state type legislation snuck in along with all of this legislation surrounding cryptocurrency. This is just evidence to that fact, right? So the act, which sets out a regulatory framework for payment stablecoin issuers, directs the Treasury to explore new compliance technologies, including application programming interfaces, artificial intelligence, digital identity verification, and blockchain monitoring. One of the ideas in the request for comment is the potential for DeFi protocols to integrate digital identity credentials directly into their code. Under this model, a smart contract could automatically verify a user's credential before executing a transaction, effectively building KYC and AML safeguards into blockchain infrastructure. No! No! Self-custody. Don't use smart contracts now. I mean, we really are going back. We're going back like it's like this thing where it's like, well, maybe smart contracts were a terrible idea. According to Treasury Digital Identity Solutions, which may include government IDs, biometrics, or portable credentials, could reduce compliance costs while strengthening privacy protections. They could also make it easier for financial institutions and DeFi services to detect money laundering, terrorist financing, and or sanction evasions before transactions occur. So obviously I'm going to I'll always harp on the same thing. They will utilize fear to strip every single right from you that they can possibly strip away from you. Every single God-given right, well, they don't believe in God anymore, and that's part of the problem, but every single God-given right that you have, that we've enjoyed, they will continue to utilize fear to strip it away from you. Public comments are open until October 17th, so 2025. So I definitely recommend putting in your public comments right now on this in particular. Last week, several major U.S. banking groups led by the Bank Policy Institute, and this was supposed to be the void of banks and governments, and this is all it's turning into. It's crazy, but it went from get rid of banks and get rid of government participation within the economy via cryptocurrency into basically a tool in which is best used to invade your privacy and take control of the economy. Like, that's effectively what happened, right? Okay, so they urged Congress to tighten rules under the Genius Act, warning that loophole could let stablecoin issuers bypass restrictions on paying interest. In a letter Tuesday, BPI said the gap could allow issuers to partner with exchanges or affiliates to offer yields, undermining the intent of the law. The group cautioned that unchecked growth of yield-bearing stablecoins could trigger up to $6.6 trillion in deposit outflows from traditional banks, threatening credit access for businesses. No, you know what it threatens? It threatens the viability and the need for a bank. This is like when, the assistant manager is under threat of getting laid off. He's like, no, I don't do that. I actually do stuff, but they don't actually do shit. Like, that's what this is. And as the boomers fade out, I think we're starting to realize that middle management is BS. But banks are middle management of the economy. And we don't need them. Rant over. All right. Get off Windows. Ignore this. I was playing Fortnite with my kiddo. Okay. But there are ways to do this. We can talk about it. Get off Windows, boys. They're destroying your SSD. Windows 11 latest security update is reporting causing several SSD failures when writing a large number of files at once. It is now reported that the latest Windows 11 update is causing SSDs to become non-functional after a large data write, and it seems to have affected several drives. Well, Microsoft's updates with their OS have brought in new problems for PC gamers several times in the past, and it seems like your SSDs might not be safe this time. In a deep dive by an ex-user, it is revealed that after KB 5063878, make sure you don't update to that, pause your updates right now, security update on On Windows 11, that dropped a few days ago, storage drives reportedly malfunction with large files or when large files are being written to them at once. The user himself spotted the trouble when he was updating Cyberpunk 2077 with the new security code. Before we dive into the specifics of the report, it is essential to note that these details have emerged from the internal testing and benchmarking, and neither SSD manufacturers nor Microsoft have verified the SSD failure issue. Yeah, they'll try to ignore it as long as they can. His claim that problems within the SSDs could appear if there's approximately 50 gigabytes of continuous writing, and there are similar issues within HDDs as well. Hence, this isn't just a specific thing to one storage drive. Right now, the verified drives that have failed are Corsair Force MP600s, Phison PS5 5012-E12 controller equipped SSDs, Kioxa Xeria Plus G4s, FICWAT FN955s, and ScanDisk Extreme Pro M.2 NVMe 3D SSDs. For now, the issue isn't widespread, and it hasn't been reported across public forums, but the security update might have something to do with SSDs failing to perform after the data writes. Our best reasoning for this problem is likely from a storage driver or kernel level regression that came with the update, which mishandles long sequential writes, ultimately leading to controller lockup, which makes the drive disappear and is not recognizable by the OS. We are gathering more updates, and that's what they go on to say. Now, like I said, a big way that you can go ahead and solve this is you can pop into Windows updates in your settings, pause updates for now. You can also roll back drivers, and you can Google how to do all this. So my recommendation to avoid this right now, if you're running a Windows machine and an NVMe that's extremely expensive and you don't want to buy another one, just to be safe, go in and pause your updates. And if you have already gotten this particular KB, go ahead and pop in and roll back that driver real quick, especially before you do a big game update or something along those lines, or in case you're about to plot some new drives or something, which I don't know why anybody would plot new drives with Windows anymore, but it is what it is. Anyways, 10K Raptors for life. Those were badass SSDs, those little black ones. Is that what you're talking about? I love those things. I wanted to do a reaction to the technicals. He said, GG, I think he's quitting mining, as is everybody else right now, evidenced by the amount of people trying to sell hardware over at sonofatech.locals.com. If you want to go check it out, a lot of people are posting their hardware for sale. Maybe you can get some good deals if you're in the market and you want to continue in this journey of GPU mining. Despite all the scams, the poor direction of cryptocurrency and everything else, well, we can still keep some light at the end of the tunnel and maybe support some good privacy networks that are still fighting for decentralization. Let's go ahead and watch it though. Look at them arms. It's boring, dude. Get to it. Them blower fans. What do? You're gonna kill it. The humidity of the vape. So is this supposed to be the shutting down? Is that what GG means in all this? We're all going bald now. We're getting old, dude. What is that? Oh, he's just cleaning. I'm confused. We should take this apart and pull the boards out. It's like 6 screws, dude. Okay, we're good. He's doing it. I thought he would. I knew he would. Don't worry about it. Nope, never mind. Look at all that dust. Don't put it in the bag with the dust. No! Now that static bag's gonna have dust all in it. I'm not buying a miner from you. It'd be like buying a miner from me. Is this what everybody's doing now? That was it. Damn. Do you guys think he's turning off for good, or just turning that one miner off for good? Post a link for you guys now in chat. I think a lot of people, how many people in chat are still mining? Sound off if you're still mining. I'm curious. I wanted to see what was going on though. It wasn't as informational as I would have liked. So Toll said, son, can you explain one more time the things surrounding the 51% attack and the purpose of it and the pros and cons? There's no real pros. I mean, it depends. Like, I guess the only pro would be the price of Qubic going up via basically scalping other cryptos, right? So when we look at what's going on in particular, Qubic decided to intentionally force or attempt a 51% attack on Monero via incentivizing miners more to mine it through a Qubic pool, right? Now, the technicals behind it, as far as how it's translating the jobs from the Monero blockchain to the miner that's connected to a Qubic pool, I don't have details on for you, but that's effectively what's going on. The devs then get paid out in Monero, and then they take that and they buy Qubic, and then they use the Qubic that they buy with the Monero to increase the reward that they pay out to the miners. Now, right now, they're advertising somewhere around 3 times the profitability compared to mining Monero directly. A majority of the hash rate is still coming from GPUs, interestingly enough, and not as much CPUs, but that is shifting. And then they basically did announce that they wanted to intentionally try to 51% it, and that wasn't successful. However, they were successful for a brief time in doing what is known as selfish mining, where they submit a solved block at a specific time that will orphan another valid block, thereby taking over, the emissions of the Monero blockchain for a brief time. And that is effectively where we're at. Now, they are continuing the Monero attack, and they will be targeting a 51% attack again on Monero. But they have also announced another attack on Dogecoin now at this time. They did a vote. They want to prove that they can do it with ASICs as well. They're still up in the air as to, what that will look like. If you'll point your script miners to a Qubic pool, then we'll translate that work through Qubic. And they will attempt to do some sort of reorg attack via 51% or some sort of selfish mining block invalidation or block orphaned block attack type thing, like selfish mining or whatever on Dogecoin. So that's kind of where we're at with that, but please watch the rest of the video if you're interested on that. Just rewind. You know what I mean? Because I did cover it for like a good hour and a half today. How do you do the 51% attack, and how do you do the attack, and what happens? Well, if you take, what do you mean? You have to get, so it's effectively you take over 51% of the hash rate, and then you can write the blocks, right? So you're effectively able to manipulate transactions. Typically what happens is a double spend attack, where they'll, spend twice, but there's a lot of good articles. I think I had one pulled up yesterday. Over, I don't know if these are any good. Yeah, these aren't really. I had a really good one, but I don't know where it is. I don't know why it's not popping up as red before. It was in the last video, we covered it a little bit more. As far as like the things you can do with it and all of that. There's been a lot of, but the primary thing that happens is double spending, which means one transaction is done multiple times, right? Where you're able to spend, like, let's say you have one Bitcoin and you can spend it twice. So you effectively, that's the biggest threat, which we did talk about yesterday. But I guess maybe I need to understand, do you mean as far as from like what commands you would put in from the pool operator's perspective to do so? That's all based off of, longest chain wins, right? So you have to effectively have the longest, you have to have the biggest database, right? Effectively, node, right? I think is the best way to explain that. And then the network will say, this is the correct one. Let's see if they have a good example here. So is this a good one? Let's see. So an example, no, that's the example. That's Ethereum Classic. And this was actually done with half the nodes on Ethereum in 2019, which I wasn't aware of this. Were you guys? I think we were. Never mind. That's not a good example. This is a terrible example. Yeah. So see how you're effectively, so when you build the longest chain, you can replace the transaction here, and then it will read this chain instead of this chain now. This is good. Correct. I'm trying to think if he means like how they do it, right? Like, or what they, because it's not like a physical, or I guess not there's not like anything you do, other than point the hash rate and write a longer chain. And then you can manipulate the transactions within that longer chain to change it, right? So then all of a sudden, all the miners and all the nodes, they accept the longer chain, and whatever data is in the chain is what they adhere to, right? So from what you're trying to do is you're trying to speed up and get to the next block and submit that before the original chain does, so that it accepts that as, like Slowest Time Lord said, the truth. I think this is a good visual representation of it though, right? So then, yeah, so when nodes receive a new longer chain of blocks, they will perform a chain reorganization to deactivate blocks in the old longest chain and activate the blocks in the new longest chain And that's when the transactions are replaced and you basically or effectively can have a double spend or spend your Bitcoin twice, right? That one Bitcoin. Oh, shit. I wasn't even showing you guys. So here. Sorry. My bad. I'm like pointing and being like, so this is how it works because I finally found a good one. So your goal is to build the longest chain. And then once you build the longest chain and that gets submitted to the network, right? The network will then take this chain as truth. And so if you replace this transaction and you put it into this one and then it recognizes that new blockchain, it will then say, this is truth now, and the old one is no longer truth. The longest chain would be the one with more hash rate because so that is the way. So you know how people talk about difficulty, right? And difficulty adjusts to keep blocks happening at specific intervals. Bitcoin's 10 minutes, right? Well, when you add hash rate, you decrease the block time. When you lose hash rate, you increase the block time, right? And so effectively, like, you have the correct idea is that, you know, you're speeding up the block, or you're speeding up that chain, and then you get ahead of it, and then it'll have to accept it. There's been, which is why, and this is a good thing. So I want to go back and give Shai credit here because even though I don't fully agree with it, what he says, which is true, is that one of the ways to help there from a security perspective is to have like rapid emissions and fast block rates kind of stop this, right? To a certain extent, because you're moving so fast that it's hard to perform it. That's why I think it would be really interesting. I think even if they don't, it's funny because as a nerd, I'm really interested in seeing what happens with Qubic, but I also recognize that it's not good, right? Does that make sense? But I would be really curious to see how that plays out on the Kaspa network in general and how it reacts to it because of the fast block times. Yeah, but that's solo mining. As far as the 51%, and this is something I never understood, Time Lord, maybe, and I've discussed this, dare I say, argued about this with Shai, formerly Kaspa, that the fast block times, or because they're fast, it's secure from a 51% attack. I don't think that's necessarily true because computers and latency and all that work in milliseconds, right? And just because you can solo mine doesn't mean doesn't mean that you can't have a longer chain written into the node that's submitted as the final truth, right? So I don't know. And maybe that's a lack of understanding on my part, but I didn't get a sufficient answer as to how that stops it. I think it's more difficult, yes. You're going to have to, but I don't know. I don't think it's impossible. Yeah, I don't think because it's still effectively the same thing, right? Anyways, I think it's all really interesting. And like I said, even though I don't think that they should be doing that at Qubic, I think that it's, like, from a nerd perspective, I am super fascinated by all this. I think it's really interesting. And I think, you know, here's where I will give credit And I think it's like this idea that it exposes an issue and then it tests the viability of different projects to where it's kind of necessary to do from the perspective of like, if blockchain or a particular blockchain is supposed to have any staying power, it needs to be able to be resilient against this. So it's something that kind of has to happen to prove blockchain out. But then you're still left in an ethical quandary surrounding it, right? Like the difference between like, and you have to, I guess, delineate between, you know, the white hat activity and black hat activity or whatever, right? So I kind of look at it from there, and I know Qubic said they wouldn't do anything necessarily nefarious, but then it seemed like they did with the selfish mining. So I don't know. Yeah, like a stress test, and I think that like I do pen testing all the time, you know, or even like earlier today, I was testing the Qubic pools. I found a bunch of Qubic IPs that still have port 22 open. I'm not going to attack it, but I am aware of where their vulnerabilities are. You know what I mean? Out of curiosity, you know, it's like, oh, they just left it on the default port and it's open and available to WAN. I don't know why you would do that, but it is. Now, to be fair, they have RSA keys enabled, so that's good. But Qubic.ly is wide open. Miner.io or minerlab.io is open. I didn't check Jetski, A pool, or Nevermind. And some would argue that it's fine for it to be open to WAN. None of my cybersecurity guys would agree that that's okay to do, but is what it is. Bum, bum, bum. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today. I'll be live over on twitch.tv/blindrun, hopefully playing some video games and hanging out with y'all. I'll see you next Tuesday.